Rich Powell, welcome to Tech Talk with Daniel.
Thank you.
With a career spanning from pages of Mad Magazine to classic Sierra games like King's Quest and Space Quest, your career is as diverse as it is distinguished. So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
How did you get into art?
Oh, well, I have three older brothers, and my brother Bill did a lot of cartooning when we were kids, and I just wanted to be like Bill, so I copied him.
So he started drawing things, and you started drawing the same things, or
the same thing? Yeah. Telling my friends that it was my idea. Yeah.
And what was your first paid job as an artist?
The first paid job. Well, doing some logo work for some local businesses after I got out of the military.
So you approached them. How did you advertise their services?
A friend knew, had a shop that was opening, and they contacted me because he knew that I could possibly do it.
And how did you create the logos at the time? Did you draw it on paper? Did you use any software?
No, there was no software. The first software I ever got was a friend of mine gave me his used Amiga.
Mm-hmm.
And basically you made a checkered ball that would rotate if you were lucky. I was not interested at all in the tech aspects of it all.
So you drew it on paper and handed it to them?
Yeah, we drew it on paper, and then it went to a shop, where it was photographed and made into a poster, or a banner or whatever. We didn't have banners then either. It's hard for me to remember all the technical aspects of back then because it's gotten so used to this new stuff,
So when did you start working at Sierra Online?
Well, when I got out of the Marines, I went back to school. And the school I was at was more fine arts. You learn how to draw and paint. They really didn't know the first thing about getting a job. It was Cal State Hayward across from San Francisco. So when I graduated, I got a job at a local gallery in Walnut Creek, California, where I was miserable because I was selling this schlock art, and here I was trying to be a serious painter. And one day in the San Francisco Chronicle, my girlfriend's mother saw an ad for game companies looking for work. And the first one was I think it was Sega or something in Santa Clara.
Mm-hmm.
But my girlfriend and I had already, we were getting, I don't know if we were engaged yet, but we'd always said we wanted to go live in the mountains somewhere when we retired, if we ever got to that point. And when I saw the one for Sierra, I didn't know what Sierra was. I didn't know anything about them. So I applied for that. Yeah.
So you chose Sierra just because of its headquarters, the location of its
headquarters? No, I'd have taken any art job I could get. But, the fact that it was up there in the mountains was pretty spectacular. I remember going down for the interview. My old man, who was a World War II vet, and he liked to paint on his time off, when he came home. He's a good painter. But he said, we're trying to decide what to wear to the Sierra interview. And, he's thinking, at least a jacket. And I'm thinking t-shirt, whatever. So he picks out this yellow jacket. He says, this is what an artist would wear, that's kind of hip. This old yellow jacket from the 60s or something. So we lied to him and said, yeah, I'm going to wear that when I go. I'm glad I didn't. When I got to Sierra Online, it was so laid back. I was kind of surprised.
It's a problem with all of the people I've interviewed because all of them overdressed for the interview itself. And usually it's either their first corporate job or their second one. So they either wear a jacket or an entire suit, and you usually get weird looks.
Well, I was tempted. I was tempted to wear a suit, because I was just out of the Marines, so I was all, a few years out of the Marines, so I was tempted.
You're the first person I interviewed who actually wore what should have been worn for the interview process at Sierra Online or any tech company. And at that point in time, and in general, even nowadays, if you wear a suit to a tech company, people think you're weird.
Yeah.
Or outdated.
Yeah. Which I am now.
And what was the interview process like at Sierra?
It was great, man. They had just moved into the big tool shed, what we used to call it, the big new building where they were when they closed. And I first went in there and I sat in the lobby and I'm looking at these interactive magazines and thinking, oh, okay, this is the kind of games they make. And I went back and I met Bill Davis, who was the art director at the time, who had this long curly hair and was real cool. And I had my pretty half-assed portfolio I'd put together myself because they didn't have a class on how to do that stuff. I wasn't like these art center guys that came later and had these really great portfolios. And I remember just sitting there talking with Bill, and we're going through this half-assed portfolio, and I had done a portrait of Bob Dylan, and Bill was a big Bob Dylan fan. So that made me a little more comfortable and relaxed. And then we started walking through the building, and everybody was downstairs still. The first person I remember meeting was Doug Herring, who was sort of the grand poobah back then. He had all these cool, EC books on his shelf and all those, the things that would become so normal at a game company, all the toys and stuff like that. I couldn't believe these guys had all these toys on their desks. And I met Barry. I remember Barry quite a bit. Barry Smith. He was a character. The one thing that happened that was kind of funny was I had just met Barry, and then I met this programmer named Kevin Ray. And Kevin was sitting there, and I said, "Hi, this is Kevin Ray." And he goes, he said, "Hi, I'm Kevin Ray." And I had just met Barry, so I thought the guy was kidding around with me. And I said, "Hi, I'm Rich Powell." Well, I didn't know that was his real voice,
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Amazing first impression. Well done.
Well, he was just a quiet guy. He's quiet, one of the programmers, so he didn't give a shit. But it was a lot of fun. It was a great interview. But I didn't have a clue if I was hired or not when I left, so I was a little nervous. Yeah.
So, at that point in time, you hadn't played any Sierra games at all?
No, never even knew what they were. The only games I played were like arcade games, like Asteroids and things like that. Yeah.
And after they hired you, what was your first day at Sierra like?
Oh, this was funny too, because it turned out I was hired to be a color conversion artist. And I was going to be doing the Amiga conversions because I had said that I had experience with an Amiga and a Mac. We had a very small computer intro class at college. We were just totally lost. The teacher didn't know how to use them either. So they didn't know, number one, I'm colorblind. And number two, I'd never used, I walked in and I saw the 3 buttons on the mouse and I was shocked, or the 2 buttons at the time, I think. I just was like, oh my God, what have I got myself into? And the first gig I had was doing it wasn't even color conversion. I was just helping out while they were getting that stuff ready. I was cleaning up animations for Hoyle's Book of Games, black and white. So it was animating a little jester, doing tricks and cartwheels and stuff, but very, very low resolution. So you really had to juggle the pixels.
Wait, so you're colorblind?
Yeah, I'm red-green colorblind. Yeah, so I mean it's slight, but it made a big difference when I was converting like King's Quest down to 32 colors for the Amiga. There was a lot of cyan or greenish blue in the sky, and I didn't even see it. But about that time, Terry Falls was hired, and a woman named Fee, gosh, I can't remember her last name. It changed when she got married. But we all sat together in the same room and helped each other out. We had the greatest team, and Steve Collier was our programmer. He'd come in quite a bit. It was a great little team. And, I'd just be working with the conversion programmers. So it was all very small. I recall, having never done any of this kind of thing, going home and dreaming in pixels, and it was miserable, and one night I was getting cold in bed, and I tried to click and drag my covers up. Yeah. That Hoyles thing was just terrible. But we got introduced to a lot of interesting Sierra games because we went through them quick. We did Jones in the Fast Lane and King's Quest and Space Quest, the first VGA games. Yeah.
So you started in 1990, right?
Yeah, just before, like at the end of 1990. Yes.
So back in 1990, there were studio tours instead of Sierra Online, in which fans could walk around the office and look at what everyone is working on. What do you remember about these tours?
So the tours would come up, and this is later on, actually. So I had moved on to working on regular games by the time I remember the tours. I forget who, Kelly, I think, gave the tours. Kelly Spurgeon, yeah, pretty lady. And I'd finagled my way onto games by that time, but they'd come through, and she would look into our room, and somebody would be working. We had scrollers, the big wide paintings. She said, "This is where the scrolling is done." And we'd say all this stuff that was wrong, and we would just laugh. But I remember distinctly this one family that came up, and they were all wearing matching orange jumpsuits, and they came in a big Winnebago. A parent and two kids, I believe. And we went down at break time to have cigarettes or play hacky sack. And they were standing there, and we got to talk to them. I said, "Oh, are you going to go see Yosemite while you're here?" And they're like, "What's Yosemite?" They came all that way, right at the gate of Yosemite, didn't know anything about it.
Sounds like they were part of a cult.
Yeah, the Sierra cult. That's right. The same cult you were in, buddy.
Exactly.
Yeah. We got a lot of tours. A lot of people came up there just for that.
So in 1991, you were credited for animation in Police Quest 3, The Kindred. What can you tell me about the production of this game?
That would have been just cleanup more than likely. But what I remember of that game is I tried to paint my first background. I was working with there were three Larson brothers. There was Nate, and Nate and I were pretty close. And his brothers, I can't quite remember. They were Mormon guys from Salt Lake City, big outdoorsmen. And Nate was I think he had maybe gone to Art Center, I'm not sure, but he and his brother were good painters, and they'd take it back to the apartments where we lived, and everybody had this certain set of paints that Sierra had, the cell paints and illustration board. And there were standard colors you'd use, and, we're painting these very boring looking police offices. It was all new to me. Like I had never painted before. I was always just drawing. That's what I remember from Police Quest, and how much the interior of the police station looked like the interior of Sierra Online. Yeah.
So at that time, did you use scanners, or did you paint everything directly on the computer?
No. We didn't. With scanners. They didn't use Photoshop until we were doing Quest for Glory 5. I don't think they let us use Photoshop.
You probably used Deluxe Paint.
No, they had a what do you call it? An in-house program we did all of our art and animation with. I forget what it was called.
SCI.
Something like that. It was very, very difficult to use. And, when we saw, like, for example, when Curandia came out, I think I was working on Quest for Glory at that time. I was like, God, look at this. How come we can't use these tools to come up with this kind of art, It was frustrating.
Still in 1991, you were credited as the fisherman in EcoQuest, The Search for Cetus. Do you remember your role in the game?
Yeah. I remember going in to record about 4 lines or something. Something was caught in the propeller or something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
At the time, I was still doing the Amiga stuff, but I was trying to get my foot in the door on the regular games, So somebody's birthday would come up and I'd do a big caricature of them, and we would pass that around the office and everybody would sign it. So people were starting to see that I had drafting skills. And I think one of the first art jobs I had where they said, hey, I want Powell to work on this, was probably Arturo Sinclair doing that claymation stuff. Did you know that they did claymation for one of the Quest for Glories?
Yeah, when they, I think for the remake itself.
Yeah, Quest for Glory 1, that's right. Yeah, so we made all these heads out of clay. He was such a creative guy. He'd come from Mexico City, and he was a real out-of-the-box thinker. I'm surprised they let him do that. I mean, that was pretty weird. We were taking all these photos of these clay heads.
Let's watch a clip of you as the fisherman in EcoQuest.
Okay.
Hey, Mr. Fisherman.
What? Who said that?
I'm down here.
Oh, a diver, eh? Why didn't you say so, cockamamie kids?
We just swam up through some of your trash. Lots of creatures have to live in the ocean. You shouldn't dump your stuff in here,
What's that? Creatures, is it? What do you think I'm fishing for? The ocean's a big place, matey. That little bit of trash ain't gonna hurt them fishies none.
Stop.
So, first of all, you sound younger now than you did back then.
Oh, a fish, eh? That's my best Edgar Bergen. Or no, there's some old Western guy. Shit, what the hell was his name? Anyhow, you can tell I wasn't going to be an actor. Boy, that was some flat reading.
Well, back then, it seems like it was pretty popular to use Sierra employees as voice actors for the talkie games, which always surprised me because you started using actual voice actors pretty late in the process, while other companies were already using them for quite a while.
They were cheap. They were very cheap.
Yeah, because you already pay the Sierra employees. I guess you didn't get any extra pay for voicing Mr. Fisherman.
They already had cut our overtime by that time, I think. I think Richard Aronson was the owl in King's Quest. All those guys will be at the reunion this year. I can't make it. I wish I could.
You know how this reunion came to be?
No.
I interviewed Steve Conrad. Steve Conrad was the first Sierra employee I interviewed. And when my conversation with him premiered on YouTube, Bill Shockley was cleaning his garage, and the conversation popped in his YouTube feed. And so he started playing it while he was cleaning his garage, and then he joined in the chat. And then Steve joined the chat, the live chat during the conversation, and then they started talking after they haven't talked for several years. And then after the conversation, they decided to do this reunion. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, now Bill's running the whole show, I think.
Mm-hmm. Still in 1991, you were also credited for graphics and artwork in Leisure Suit Larry 5. Passionate Petty does a little undercover work. What can you tell me about this game?
Don't even recall working on that one. Was Bill Skirvin the art director? I don't remember. I don't recall that one. On a couple of games, I think I credited myself as Mustafa Powell instead of Rich Powell, too.
Really?
Yeah. Being a wise guy.
So the creative director on Leisure Suit Larry 5 was Bill Davis.
Bill Davis, huh? Wow. Well, that's a creative director. That's not the art director. Bill Davis was the creative director for everything at the time.
Jane Cardinal was the art director.
Oh,
and Cheryl
okay.
Lloyd as well.
Wow, I forgot about Jane Cardinal. She was very nice. I can't recall at all when I did that. I certainly wasn't drawing pretty girls, because I still can't to this day. So some kind of cartoony something or other. I worked, I wasn't on a team from start to finish, I don't think, until Quest for Glory 5.
Around 1981, the following photos were taken. What can you tell me about these photos?
Oh, that's my ex-wife, Frankie, as Roadkill.
Mm-hmm.
That's Nate Gams as a samurai.
Samurai, yeah.
That's me in the back with, I was a bandito.
Mm-hmm.
There's Arturo Sinclair, too. Yeah, there's Barry Smith with the horns.
Mm-hmm.
Karen Nestor. This little old lady, Gloria Garland. They still live up there. I don't recall the lady in the cowboy hat. And the little
Bill
girl
works in this office nowadays.
Yeah. So did I. I worked there for a couple companies after Sierra. Yeah.
It's a popular building.
Well, it's perfectly wired for it, So that's the door where we came in. That's where you had to slide your card in to come in from downstairs. Yeah.
You had a huge gun.
Yes. Big bullets. Oh, Barry Smith was a funny guy.
Yeah. In 1992, you were credited for additional graphics and artwork on the CD-ROM version of Jones in the Fast Lane.
Mm-hmm.
Now, since you're not credited on the floppy version of the game, I can only assume that you've worked on the CD enhanced graphics. Do you remember the graphic assets you worked on?
Yeah, I did most of the lip syncing on that game. I spent hours and hours and hours. We had this lip syncing tool, and I had like 10 mouths I could pick from. And you would choose them and replay the audio and see if it looked halfway like it was right. At first, you'd use so many, you thought you had to use this one mouth movement for every syllable, but really, I finally discovered you could skip a whole lot of them, and it looked much better. But yeah, I did a lot of lip syncing. It was a funny written game. I don't know who wrote that game, but it was pretty funny. I remember hearing the jokes and thinking it was pretty good.
So the lip syncing was a manual process?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There were no automated tools in order to at least, give you a template to work with, like whatever it could recognize as certain syllables. You would do it for every line in the game?
Yeah, it was totally, the ones where you saw the talkers, yeah. It was a real Wild West thing. I mean, I don't know if we were the first ones to have lip syncing in a game, but if there was technology out there, they certainly didn't research it and get it. Sierra kept things so proprietary, it seemed.
At LucasArts, usually for the close-ups, they would work on the lip syncing, but for the wide shots, they just have the character say watermelon, watermelon, watermelon. And so it looks like he's saying something, and usually it fits the whatever line he's trying to say. So that worked great. Still in 1992, you were credited as a background artist on Police Quest 1, the VGA remake.
There, I got one of those paintings in. That was my first painting. I probably did one.
Well, you're a background artist, not a backgrounds artist.
Yes.
They mentioned the only one you worked on. Still in 1992, you are credited for incredible artwork on Quest for Glory 1, So You Want to Be a Hero VGA remake. Now, don't get me wrong, all of your artwork is incredible, but what incredible artwork did you produce for this game to get this special credit?
So that was the Quest for Glory 1 remake?
Mm-hmm.
That would have been the Probably the claymation stuff and some of the spells, probably. Animating the spells. You know who was the great animator of spells was Jeff Crow, the brother of Mark Crow, who was my next door neighbor up in the apartments. And he had a gift for that. He was really good at making these spells out of these small pixels.
Still in 1992, you're credited for acting and voiceovers on Quest for Glory 3, Wages of War. The characters you provided the voices for aren't listed in the credits. Do you recall which characters you voiced?
What land did that take place in? The Wages of War, was that the one in with the Lion King and all that stuff?
In the Africa-like world of Tarna.
Yeah. I don't remember what voices I did. I did a lot of artwork on that game, though. Yeah. Probably, maybe, maybe somebody in the market. Probably one of the market vendors.
Okay. Still in 1992, you're credited for animation on Crazy Nick's Software Picks King Graham's Board Game Challenge. Can you share some insights about your contributions to this game?
That one's gone, man. I don't remember that at all. No. That sounds like something I might have worked on with Al Euphrasio.
It's one of those games where you take an IP, in this case King's Quest, and just use it on a random game. In this case, it was checkers, and I think it was checkers.
Oh, okay.
So...
Okay. I
so
vaguely remember
King Graham in the top left corner.
Yeah.
And you were playing checkers with him.
Beating his ass.
I'd like to be a fly on the wall in the pitch meeting for this game. Let's make a checkers game with King Graham.
Yeah, they must have been with some kind of art that already existed. They were trying to just crank something out.
Yeah, they took something from, King's Quest V and placed it in a checkers game they probably had from the Hoyle games.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And equals profit.
Yes.
Still in 1992, quite a busy year if you ask me, you're credited for lip syncing on The Dagger of Amun-Ra.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Yeah. Back to that old lip sync. I was the lip sync guy now.
Now,
I guess they hadn't come out with a program for that stuff yet.
Even in this game, you had to do it manually? You haven't?
Yeah. Yeah, man. I'm credited. I'm the lip syncer.
Yeah, in this game, you're credited as the lip syncer. In the other game, you're credited for, additional graphics or whatever.
Yeah.
They tried to be more specific this time. In 1993, you are credited for additional art on Pepper's Adventures in Time. What details can you offer about your work on this game?
I remember, so Terry Falls, who was in the conversion room with me, I think he moved over there. He might have been art director for a little while or did it. I don't know. But I know he was working on that game, so we were pretty good friends, and he probably threw me a few things to do or asked me to do something that was probably, they usually used me for when they needed something extra cartoony looking. I hadn't started doing concept work yet.
Now, since this is your only credit in 1993, I'm curious to know what kept you busy throughout 1993.
I might have been working on concept stuff for Lighthouse.
Or
this might be when I moved on to where I was doing concept work. I'd go in a room and I'd just draw all day. I'd work with the art director like John Bach, and he'd describe the characters, prior to making the game. That's when did Lighthouse come out?
Much later, around 96, but I think it was for Outpost, which came out in 94.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did a lot of concept work for Outpost.
Speaking of concept art for Outpost, here's our concept art for Outpost.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would work with John Bach and Bruce Balfour. And Bruce Balfour came up with this idea of the mushroom ship, which is, these ones we deemed them too modern. So we went back to the real steampunk looking thing. These were all my ideas. At the same time, I started freelancing at that point too, doing T-shirts outside of work.
Now, I love the fact that you put in a lot of detail into these drawings, even though probably when these drawings were converted to digital art, it was in low res, and so a lot of the detail was gone.
Well, I ended up building a lot of the stuff in Outpost. So I went from the sketch to actually building it. That was just John Bach and I working together and first sticking our fingers into 3D and not knowing what the hell we were doing. A lot of texture maps.
In 1994, you are credited for game icons on Leisure Suit Larry's Greatest Hits and Misses, which was a compilation of Leisure Suit Larry games. What game icons did you provide for this compilation? Or maybe the real question is, now that we have a more specific credit, maybe what you were working on in Leisure Suit Larry 5 was the game icons.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't recall them, but I'm sure I did.
Okay. Whatever it is you were working on, you did a great job.
You can tell that I was working on a lot of different things at once. I'd get pulled off of things and do little things for games. It's confusing.
In 1994, you were credited for video on Space Quest Collector's Edition. Now, I presume that this credit was given due to your involvement in the Space Quest Behind Closed Doors skit.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find you anywhere in the video. Do you remember which role? I think
I was just helping. I was helping, with the boom mic and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay. I
think that took place over 1 day or something, maybe 1 day or 2 days.
I know. Fun. That's where I know Barry T. Smith from, because I think the narrator is Josh Mandel, who says Barry T. Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Still in 1994, you were credited for 3D inventory objects on King's Quest VII, The Princess Bride. Now, given that this is my favorite King's Quest game, I can talk about this one for hours. Were you only in charge of the 3D inventory items, or did you also work on other 3D elements in the game, like, for example, the dragon?
No. So I'd be working on probably Outpost at the time, or Lighthouse. I was like a 3D artist now, and I remember I did. Do the inventory icons spin in the game?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I'd create them and spin them.
It was a new concept for CR games to have 3D spinning inventory items. And a lot of the puzzles, even in later games with 3D inventory items, required you to spin at least one object in order to solve a certain puzzle. So in King's Quest VII, it was a picnic basket, which you had to rotate in order to find a kernel of corn inside the picnic basket.
Yeah, that was, everybody was in love with 3D at the time. About that time, we hired some dedicated 3D artists with Maya computers. Don't recall their name, but yeah, they had their own separate room, and they were real 3D. We didn't know what we were doing, making the Outpost stuff and the Lighthouse stuff.
So when I look at the assets for King's Quest VII, I noticed that the 3D inventory items were just exported as a series of frames. Each angle of that object would be a different frame, and there was no real 3D. It was pre-rendered. So how did you render these items?
We probably did screenshots, whatever was the quick and dirtiest way.
Now, so the quick and dirtiest way is always the best way.
Yeah.
Time to market was important for every company at the time, but especially at Sierra, from what I've heard, the overtime and the fact that every game had to be ready for the holiday season, it seemed like everything, whatever you could produce at the fastest time that could work well within a game would be the right solution.
Yeah, and then towards the end of the game, the marketing people would be breathing down your neck to get the game out. You know what happened with the Outpost, it went out unfinished, basically. It's terrible. And at that point, they stopped paying us overtime. There was a lot of grousing about that in those years, because they used to get paid a lot of overtime around Christmas time for the push, and then they made us all salaried.
I hate to break it to you, but King's Quest 7 also came out unfinished.
Okay.
So they had to release it a year after with a few bug fixes, because there were a few game-breaking bugs in the original release, because they had to release it for the 1994 Christmas holiday season.
Wow, that seems like that was so... 1994? That's how long ago we did that? Wow.
King's Quest 7 celebrates its 30th anniversary this year. Wow.
It seems like that's so early on in the years, but it seemed like it was a long time when we were working there.
In 1995, you were credited for art and video post-production on Phantasmagoria.
Oh, yeah.
Do you recall any
Everybody got pulled into that game. Yeah, taking blue pixels off of everything. Because it was all shot with blue screen and it was, everybody had this glow of blue around them. So everybody was taking blue pixels off of people for forever.
So you worked on the character sprites by removing the blue pixels, or did you also work on the FMV scenes in which, they also used blue screen, but it wasn't...
What? I recall mostly character stuff, but it could have been whatever they had, Yeah, that was when everybody was over at the film place filming. Yep. Yeah. I remember Travis Leonard and I, we were down in this dark room removing blue pixels forever. Yeah.
And
taking a break at 10 o'clock to go play hacky sack.
With Bill Shockley.
Bill Shockley, Steve Conrad, Travis, Bill Davis Jr. Yeah, those were fun times. Until Castle Wolfenstein came out, or whatever that was. Then nobody came out on break anymore. Everybody was in playing that game.
And it's not even a Sierra game.
No, but it was so addictive. It was, it was the first person shooter. We'd never seen that before.
And I remember, if I remember correctly, id Software wanted to sell the rights to Castle Wolfenstein to Sierra, and Ken Williams thought it was too violent or whatever. And then 2 years after, they create Phantasmagoria, which is like the goriest thing ever created. And so...
By his wife.
By his wife, exactly. Yeah. That's why everyone was pulled into this project.
Yep.
Did you manage to hold on to any of the original uncompressed footage?
Oh, I wouldn't have had any of that, no. And if I did, it would have been on a zip drive or something like that. That's, floppy drives. No.
About a year ago, I found in the Phantasmagoria CDs character sprites of an unknown woman that, from the looks of it, was supposed to be the stand-in for Victoria Morcell, which is the lead actress. Either before she was hired or while the crew was trying to perform a few technical tests. Now, I asked Roberta and I asked Victoria if they knew who she was, and they unfortunately didn't know who she was. But Steve Conrad, in my conversation with him, just casually name-dropped Frankie, your wife at the time, as the stand-in in the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So why did they need a stand-in at that time?
I don't know why they needed it, but she would be happy to do it, to get out of the toolbox and go over to this film studio. There was a guy there named Bob Ballou who was just the nicest guy. He was great. I always loved to go over and hang out. Yeah, one of my earliest memories over there was they were making walkers for Quest for Glory, and Corey and Lori were there. And Corey was on the treadmill, and he couldn't. When you got on a treadmill and you knew you were being filmed, you walked uncomfortably.
Mm-hmm.
And Corey kept moving his arms in tandem with his legs. And I remember Lori just standing behind him, clapping. Like if she had a whip, she'd have used it on the poor guy. Yeah, everybody was always glad to go over to the film studio because Bob was over there and there was all this cool stuff over there. Yeah.
And what were they filming there? What walk cycles for which game?
Well, for most games, we filmed walk cycles so we could animate them with, rotoscoping.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us were very amateur animators. The first big animators that they hired left pretty quickly, like Mike Milo. He went to Hollywood, and Barry and Karen. They all came from a school called Joe Kubert School in New Jersey. And it's funny, I live in a small town right now, and there's another cartoonist in the same town, believe it or not, John Zopp, who went to that school and was friends with Karen and all that stuff way back in school time. Small world. So we would use, we'd film a lot of stuff to use that for reference for animation.
So you usually did rotoscoping instead of actual animation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hey man, Max Fleischer did it. And I said, they do that in the 30s.
Star Wars did it.
Yeah. I mean, Gulliver's Travels in 1934, they were doing that.
Mm-hmm. I always wondered why the animations looked so realistic, even for, whenever a character in Police Quest got shot, then the character falling down looked more realistic than it would if you'd animate it frame by frame without any reference. So
yeah, it was filmed by Bob Ballou.
Still in 1995, you're credited for 3D animation on The Beast Within, a Gabriel Knight mystery.
Mm-hmm. What
3D elements did you get to work on?
There was a giant furnace in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots and lots of cement floors as the wolf is running through there and seeing drains and things like that. All of that stuff.
So Steve Conrad worked on the programming part of the wolf chase, and you worked on the graphics themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how did you create the layout for the rooms? Was this always the same room with different elements, or were there actual different rooms?
Well, depending on it, no, it would all be thrown. It would be parts of rooms, or it's like if you were filming a house, in a movie,
mm-hmm.
There's no back to the house, that's all open for cameras to go in and all that. So when this was all using 3D Max, which was a pretty simple 3D tool, so you'd make a plane, and good texture maps went a long way. Cylinders and planes, boxes.
Did you also work on?
We couldn't have all the count, huh?
Did you also work on the animation of the wolf closing the doors?
No, the wolf would have been done by the Maya people, probably. Yeah.
So the navigation within the corridors of that maze would have been done in 3D Max, and the characters and other elements would have been done in Maya?
Well, there'd be a map that the designer came out with, and we'd have on paper, and then there'd be certain animations that we knew were going to take place in that map. So you would only render what you needed to for those animations to to be made. Yeah.
Still in 1995, Space Quest 6 was released. Now, I know that you're not credited on the game, but I wanted to talk to you about the cover art for a bit.
Was that the guy floating in space with the glove?
Yup.
Yeah, the infamous glove.
I understand they find it really amusing that all of this detail has been put into the glove and nowhere else.
Look how simple his helmet is and everything. It's so funny. The guy must have said he was going to do this great painting, and then either hurry up, you got to get it done, or that's the only thing he had photo reference for. I don't know who painted that. I think it was done at a house.
Okay. So
that's so funny.
Maybe the left part of the cover art was done in-house, the glove and the title, and the rest was outsourced.
Oh, boy. I'll never forget seeing that for the first time.
In 1996, you were credited for character design, 3D art, and animation on Lighthouse: The Dark Being.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you remember from the production of this game while we take a look at some of the concept art that you created for the game.
Yeah, I don't really remember doing anything in 3D for that game. If anything, it would have been like an inventory item or something. I think they were mostly the Maya people doing that stuff. I had the Guardian of the Temple, I remember. Dark Being. John was a pretty heavy art director on that stuff. He was real hands-on. So this was more or less just to show what the tattoos might look like. And they were supposed to animate as he got angry, they would make faces and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was all great in concept, but I don't think it really came across in the game. You can kind of tell they're moving. There was also some big fortress monster. There was a young girl that was half like a robot or half, what do you call them?
Cyborgs.
Cyborg, yeah, half cyborg. And she was crippled in some kind of thing that went around on a track. That's where I started really getting into drawing gadgets, was with her.
So after you created the concept art and the character design, did you actually work on converting it to digital assets or 3D?
No, that would go to the Maya people, Brian Judy, and I can't remember the lady's name. I think she ended up going to Pixar. Now they were, they knew what they were doing and they had a much more advanced machine.
Still in 95, 96, I'm not sure, this photo of your office was taken. Now, I presume that it's around the time, it's around 95, 96 because of the poster of the Isaac Hayes album, Branded, which was released in 95.
Yeah, can I get a copy of that picture? I don't have that.
Sure.
So this was my dream year, man. This is where they sent me downstairs. Most of the downstairs where I was at was empty. And I had that set up. Behind me, and from this picture, would be Scott Murphy and Josh in a room. And I was creating all sorts of crazy concept art for the new Space Quest that was going, Space Quest 7.
So this is concept art for Space Quest 7 on the computer screen?
That's a picture of these old stickers I had as a kid called Wacky Packs. Mm-hmm. Wacky Packages. Yeah. That was great, man. That was a great job. All I did was create concept art and scan it. That's a big old scanner there.
That's the scanner? And what's this thing?
That looks like it might have been probably my camera from home. My daughter was 1 year old at the time, so I was making a lot of home movies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, this thing on the if you keep going left, there's a little green thing in a circle.
This
That
one?
was called Hideous Toad that I designed for Chris Carr. I forget what they used it for, but he recently contacted me he's a musician in Hawaii now, and he wanted to buy that. All these years later. Yeah, I created a lot of art right there.
Yeah.
A lot of concept art for Space Quest 7, and Outpost was done.
You had 2 screens at the time. I presume it was pretty rare. So you got 2 screens and a drawing board over here and a scanner. I mean, this entire workstation probably cost like $20,000 at the time.
Yeah, and it was a huge room I was sitting in. They totally left me alone. It was great. So is that before we made Lighthouse? No, that's after, right?
So the reason I dated this photo around 95, 96 is because the Isaac Hayes album was released in 95 and it says the new album. But I don't know. Maybe this poster has been on the wall for 3 years at the time. So.
Or I bought it used at a store. And I think this was later on, right before I got out of games and went to marketing. This was the last thing I did.
So the calendar says January,
you can almost see
February 1990. It's either 6 or 8.
8. More likely 8. Yeah.
Okay. Now we know.
So that means Bailey would be 3. But, we'd go hiking after work, and I'd bring my camera all the time. Everybody had one of those video cameras. It's funny, that thing clipped onto the drawing table. There was old pencil sharpeners we used. We used some really archaic stuff at Sierra.
Oh, right. Jeez, I haven't seen one in like 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay,
I still have that tabaret. See the tabaret here that has all the pens in it? There it is.
It's the same one?
Yeah, same one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll send you this photo after the
Thank
conversation.
You. Yeah, that's a cool picture. That was a really fun time in my life there.
In 1997, you worked on concept art, character design, and graphics for Space Quest 7, a project which was put on hold indefinitely later that year.
Yeah.
Let's look at some concept art from the game.
You know what I built in Lighthouse? I forgot, completely forgot, was I made this entire sunken ironclad that you could explore. God, what a nightmare. Yeah, R0 instead of R2.
Robopup.
This guy actually, he got made into a 3D model by Tim Lax at one point, and he lifts his leg and pees oil. That was the very first concept drawing for Space Quest 7.
So this is what I wanted to ask you about. On your website, you mentioned that you started working on concept art for Space Quest 7 back in 1993. We can even see the date next to your signature. We have RPAL 93. Now, given that Space Quest 6 was released in 1995, does that mean that you started creating concept art for Space Quest 7 while Space Quest 6...
So since this was the first one, I might have drawn this thing and gone and talked to Josh and Scott and said I wanted to do it. I was probably trying to needle my way into the job.
So Space Quest 6 was still in early development, or not even in development at all, and you already worked on Space Quest 7.
Man, I wanted to work on Space Quest. I hardly ever got to work on Space Quest. I was always doing this other stuff. Hookers.
The Fleabag Hotel.
Yeah.
The bar patron. Mad scientist. I mean, it looks like a lot of work has been put into Space Quest 7 without it producing anything in the end.
I know. It was great. And then when they went to animate this ad, they hired this guy who lied his way into the job. And he was sort of a non-trustworthy. I hate to say this on camera, but I don't remember what the dude's name is, but I did not like that dude. And I thought that video he made for this is crap. We were so let down by that. He might have gotten fired after that.
I think in my conversation with Bill Shockley, we watched that trailer of Space Quest 7.
He took
wasn't
months
done
to make
in-house?
I think he might have been partly a contractor from Fresno. I don't think he was hired full time. I think they were starting to think, I don't know if one round of layoffs had happened at that point or not. Did they talk about the layoffs where they brought us all into the theater, the local theater?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That might have happened already. And they were, I think they were already thinking things were coming. So there was a couple of contract guys they hired.
So what was the point of the teaser if the art style was not the art style that was supposed to be in the game, or wasn't even done by the artists that were supposed to work on the game?
Yeah, I was pretty pissed off about that.
So that teaser trailer is a one-man show of some contractor you brought in to create the teaser without... Did he get any, did he get that much creative freedom that he just created whatever he wanted?
Back then, if somebody was not working in the office with you, you were waiting to see what was coming on their progress. And he would be so slow. We're like, what are you coming up with? What are you coming up with? And all of a sudden he was done, You're like, oh, okay.
Okay, let's say that he created that teaser trailer, which we both agree is not that great. Why did you even release it?
I don't know. Things seemed like it was coming apart at the seams at that point, I think we saw the death of Sierra SQ7 coming. Scott Murphy wasn't feeling great. He was really bummed out about the whole thing. And that's when I got out, I moved over to marketing after that and worked on boxes and things like that. Okay.
So why was this project canceled? Was it because of the Space Quest 6 cover art?
I have no idea. And I can't believe they let me do that for like a year. Just draw cool drawings. It was fun.
Yeah.
I never complained about it. I was just glad to have that time.
Now.
Oh, yeah. That's what I was in the marketing for.
You drew this magnificent map of the realm. Now, since the game itself came out in 1997 and you're not credited on it, I can only assume that this was created just for fun?
Well, the realm was an ongoing thing. And this was created for a poster that you could buy or get. Yeah. Yeah. No computer.
So this
I was
wasn't
just learning
used
Photoshop at the time, huh?
This wasn't used in the game. It was for merchandising.
Mm-hmm, yeah. At that point, I had moved into Terry Robinson and I worked together on making merchandise and box art. I did a lot of T-shirts. There was a cool one for Dragonfire where if you went out in the sun, some words appeared on it. It said, "Some days you eat the dragon." If you go out in the sun, it says, "Some days the dragon eats you." And it was a dragon coiled up in a ball, picking his teeth with a sword.
I love the dedication and the attention to detail you've invested in this project. It looks amazing.
Well, it's fun to do. And if they pay it and give you the time to do it, that's pretty great.
Still in 1998, you were credited for background illustrations, character illustrations, and creative support on Quest for Glory 5 Dragonfire. Can you share any memorable moments from your time working on this game?
What I remember mostly for them was creating a whole bunch of spells. I created them on paper. I did the concepts for the spells. And then I think I probably animated some of them. And I don't remember doing any background art, but maybe I did.
You're credited for it, so take the credit.
Yeah. There's the spells. Yeah. Yep. The juggling lights. I can remember some of these things. Yeah. Yeah. I sold all that stuff this last year.
The original drawings?
Mm-hmm. I held on to it forever. I was waiting for the Art of Sierra to come out, which, they had already taken all this stuff up to Seattle or wherever they live and scanned it all in. So I held it onto it for years and years and years, waiting for the book to come out, and then I was going to sell it, but I kept getting approached by collectors, so I finally did it. I saved one. I saved that big Outpost spaceship, and I had the realm map up until a few months ago. I didn't want to sell that thing, but I did.
You could have stolen the original footage for Phantasmagoria. Then that would have been a great collector's item.
Why would I have that? We didn't take footage home. We went to work and went home and had Halloween parties and barbecues.
The only thing that's stopping game development companies from creating remasters of Sierra games, apart from the licensing and such, is the fact that there was no archiving process at Sierra. So there are no original drawings. There are no original recordings. Mm-hmm. Everything's in a landfill somewhere. So
yeah, apparently all the beautiful paintings for the games, like from Andy Hoyos and Ernie Chan, Ernie Chan, who did Conan comics. All of those beautiful paintings were in some storage unit, and they all got mildewed and ruined. There were so many. There's thousands.
Yeah, we could have remastered Phantasmagoria 1 and 2 if we had the original footage and not the in-game compressed footage or the in-game compressed audio.
They were probably, didn't want to spend the money on the storage, so they didn't want to buy the big computer drives. Back then everything was so small. I remember when we first had the game of 5 floppies. Whew, everybody was all upset.
Still in 1998, you were credited for terrorist, hostage, innocent bystander photos modeled by on Police Quest SWAT 2. So the photos in the game were probably modeled by a bunch of people, because in the credits you were credited alongside a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the terrorist / hostage / innocent / bystanders was modeled by you.
Don't recall.
They used your likeness. You're probably getting royalty checks.
Yeah, I'd be rich. I am rich.
And you were also credited for being part of the web group.
I did do something for the Sierra Network. Mm-hmm. Don't recall. I know I did something for them.
So Bill Shockley was also credited for the web group. I think you helped people in the forums, like answered questions and such, or not?
Or maybe created art for the website part of it. When we got laid off and I was freelancing in North Fork, Bill and I sort of had a company where we worked together for over a year making websites for people, things like that. Killer Surf web design.
Now, I have a question about the Sierra parties around that time. In the late 90s, Mike Brody had you all drinking from his dirty cowboy boot.
Mike Brocious, yeah. Ugh.
And then you loaded up the boat and went for a night cruise. And then some of you stripped naked and jumped in the lake.
Yeah. I might have instigated that. It was a beautiful lake. Bass Lake was great. Pretty.
Was this something out of the ordinary at the time, or were all Sierra parties like this?
We would throw these things called the meat blowouts down at Pine Slope, and they'd be pretty heavy drinking parties. And, if it got late where the moon was out, we might go swimming, go skinny dipping.
Was Bass Lake close to the
There was
Sierra
no
headquarters?
weird sex going on or nothing, huh?
No, please proceed.
No, we were just skinny dipping.
Was Bass Lake close to the Sierra headquarters?
Yeah, well, it was in between North Fork and Oakhurst. I lived in North Fork, and a lot of people lived near Bass Lake. It's a big, beautiful lake. Maybe 15 minutes away from the building.
Because one of the photos in Phantasmagoria was taken at Bass Lake.
Mm-hmm. There's been a few movies made there as well, like The Great Outdoors with John Candy. That's Bass Lake. Mouse Hunt was filmed at Bass Lake in North Fork.
Now, on February 22nd, 1999, the Sierra Oakhurst facility was shut down, resulting in the termination of approximately 2/3 of its employees. The day is referred to as Chainsaw Monday. Oh, what do you remember about that day?
I went in and was getting set to go to work, and Karen Nestor alerted everybody that her dongle wasn't working on her 3D Max or whatever we were using, and sure enough, mine was gone. And I remember calling my wife and saying, I think, because Frankie had already left. She left when our daughter was born in 95. And she said, well, that's kind of a relief. So then all the security, oh no, they had us into this room. They said they were going to give us birthday cake, I think.
Seriously?
Yeah. And then they said, some of you are going to go to Seattle. Some of you are going to stay. Some of you are it's over. Yeah. I don't see. That's a little gray area there where it turned into Sierra Entertainment after that, or there was we had another entity at that building in between that and Tectonic Studios. But yeah, we had a big party at Bill Shockley's.
Wait, before the party, what was the point of them saying that there's birthday cake in the meeting room?
Just to give us a reason to have a meeting.
Couldn't they have called you for a meeting, like an urgent meeting, whatever? Just an urgent meeting?
That's HR. HR, they're afraid. They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
They want to hurt anybody's feelings for 10 minutes, and then they hurt everybody's feelings.
Well, what about the other one where you went in and Ken Williams stood in front of you at the movie theater, and then they handed you an envelope on the way out that said if you're with the company or not? That was brutal. They
tried to save that theater a while back, like a few years ago. It was supposed to be shut down, and people, donated money to save that movie theater. I mean, what the good memories do you guys have from that place?
So you would call to see what was playing, and I think the guy's name was Rusty. And not only would he tell you what was playing, he would give you his a synopsis of the movie and if it was any good or not. And then when you'd go in to watch the movie, he'd have his family slides playing on the screen. Yeah, it was a pretty great little place. It was our only movie theater. I mean, we were far away from other movie theaters.
So he was the first IMDb.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Wait, and his synopsis of the movie, was it objective, or would he totally tell you
objective.
Like the movie sucks and don't even bother?
No, he would try to. He wouldn't just say it sucks. He'd say, if you like that kind of thing, it might be for you. One of my great memories from that theater is Bill Davis had the festival animation come there, and we saw the very first Ren and Stimpy ever. Oh my God, people were rolling. That was great.
So when did you leave Sierra, and what was the last project you worked on there?
Oh, maybe it probably had something to do with Babylon 5, I think. I did that 3D, there's a 3D mouse pad.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. I don't remember what the last project I was working on. But, I went home. I burned my severance check by mistake. We were making a fire. What time of year was it? don't remember what year was it.
So it was February 1999.
Mm-hmm. So we went home to make. I heated my house with a wood stove, and I threw the check in the fire. I had to call him up the next day and say, "Can I have another one?"
And did they give you another one?
Yes, yeah. Okay. I lived in this nice little cabin up in this little town called North Fork, which is south of Oakhurst. It's the geographical center of California. And I was going to stay there no matter what, And so I started really freelancing for Bill Davis. Went down to San Francisco. I worked on a couple games with him, with Rocket Science Studio. I got to work with the great Ron Cobb, then the guy that I was sort of emulating the Outpost stuff. And then Bill Shockley and I did websites, and I started getting my first freelance, like greeting card jobs and things like that. And then other companies came and started in the building. I think the first one, Craig Alexander, was Sierra FX. Was that part of that, or I can't remember. The timeline is funny. Maybe It was Yosemite Entertainment. I think that's what it's called. And then that closed. And then the guy that owned the local telephone company bought the building and started Tectonic Studios in there with Dan Scott and Bill Shockley. And I hired some other old Sierra Online guys like Chris Willis. And we were working on a massive multiplayer role-playing game.
Which is the Ninth Domain?
The Ninth Domain, yeah. Worked on that for almost 2 years before they pulled the plug.
And you are the art director on that one?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay.
There was some very cool art being made for it, but that's from there. Yeah. Chris Willis was great, making some really cool models of that stuff.
And why was it canceled?
It seemed to me the programming crew that they had came from Austin, I think. They just were not going fast enough. And I think Harry Smith, I think it was Harry Smith or Harry, whatever his name was, he got cold feet and pulled the plug.
Because it took too long to produce?
Yeah, this is, he owned this big telephone company up there, so he was used to making lots of money for nothing. So Dan Scott had talked him into funding this thing, and he thought he was going to make millions faster, probably. Yeah, it was funny. Starting that job was the first art job I ever took that gave you a urine test.
Every week, every month?
No, just to get hired. And you also got a psychological test. Mm-hmm.
Well, at least you passed in flying colors.
I don't know about flying colors, but I passed.
Or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the end of it all there.
Mm-hmm. In January 2004, you started working with Crazy Shirts. Now, as a fan of well-designed T-shirts myself, I want to know what are some of your favorite T-shirt designs?
So the ones I did for Crazy Shirts used to give you a royalty. Then they changed it. You get $1,000 if they accept your design. So I would do these very small drawings and blow them up, and they'd buy them that way. So there's one called Bill's Beer Delivery Service. It's just a hand holding a glass. I mean, that was one of their best sellers for years. I actually saw one of them in Vegas when I was down there just in February. So I did that for a while, but they started making it harder to do, and I started getting other jobs like working for Highlights and Mad, and I had a line of T-shirts of blues and jazz T-shirts for this guy in New Orleans. That ended with Katrina, the hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So since then, it's just been, freelance gig after freelance gig.
And like you said, in 2005, you started producing comics and illustrations for Mad Magazine. How'd you get involved with Mad Magazine?
They just called me one day. I don't know how they heard. I don't know how they heard of me. Must have been from my website, but it was a pretty happy call for me. I was a huge fan growing up. So.
Maybe they played, Leisure Suit Larry 5 and said, "Man,
look at those icons."
Those icons. That's really something.
Hey, did you hear that fisherman's voice?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's how a great artist sounds.
Yeah, that was fun. That's fun. That's gone now too. Yeah. Now I do my web comic, Wide Open, and I do a cybersecurity cartoon as well. It's called Charlie Ciso, and I work with this company called Tag Cyber up in New York. They're pretty serious guys. The guy was one of the first CISOs in the country, maybe the first. He was with AT&T. So I do this a series of cybersecurity cartoons that they write, and most of them are over my head.
In 2011, you got your last game credit for now, when you were credited for additional art on Jewel Quest, the Sapphire Dragon. What can you tell me about that project?
I don't know anything about that.
Really?
Yeah. Well, who made it?
Wow, this is mind-blowing. Okay.
Was it? Yes, maybe there's another Richard Powell.
Maybe.
I know Frankie worked on some games, like she did some Game Boy games, like InSync and Barbie. I don't know what the hell that is.
You see that?
Yeah. Who were Tulip Games? Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, creative director
Bill Davis is the director.
Andy Hoyos.
I know what I did. And I'm sure Andy Hoyos is there. Yep, I forgot all about that.
Okay.
I did concept drawings with Andy.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a great thing we talked.
That was cool. Huh?
It's a great thing we talked.
Yeah. Well, I forget lots of stuff.
In 2021 and 2022, your syndicated cartoon panel, Wide Open, won the National Cartoonist Society Silver Reuben. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
And second, how did you achieve this?
I just they judge you. What you do is you at the end of the year you submit your stuff to the society, and it gets judged by your peers, and then comes down to voting for the winners. The National Cartoonist Society, they're called Reuben Awards because they're named after Rube Goldberg, who used to be a cartoonist that did these crazy machines.
Yeah.
The first Reuben I got, Silver Reuben I got, was for this line of T-shirts I did of fish and wildlife for this company locally, and then they robbed me. They tried to take the copyright and all this stuff. It was a major fiasco, but it won the award, so I got to rub that in their faces. But eventually, I'll come out with an art book of that stuff.
So, were you nominated in previous years, or
that was I won. I won in maybe it was 2015 or something. I forget. So, yeah. And then I did a thing for PBS about Andy Griffith for local PBS, and that won an Emmy in the Midsouth Emmy Awards. So that was a nice surprise too.
Wow, well done.
Yeah. Yes, it's a long and storied career.
An illustrious career.
And it's almost over. I'm ready to go to the light.
It's not over because earlier this year, in March 2024, you released your book, Ignore the Singing Pig and Other Things to Try. And so you're in the peak of your career, if you ask me. It's not game icons, but it's something.
It's not game icons. No, it's not lip syncing. But I'm going to do a lot more books. I'll probably do some books based on some of the Sierra concepts, like a book of my concept art.
Mm-hmm.
At this point right now, they just don't offer a good format through the Kindle Direct Publishing where I'm doing it right now. It's very easy to do and get on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
They don't offer a nice landscape art book format yet. So
they're all portrait?
No. Like if I did the ray guns, I did a series of ray guns, and I'm going to continue to do those. So they're, when I say landscape, so wider than it is tall,
Yeah. So portrait, I mean.
Oh, so the ones they offer are all portrait. Yeah, mostly. I mean, the singing pig one is as wide as they go, which is 8.5, I think. But I just did it 6 inches or so high. They're small cartoons, so you don't need it very large.
It's weird that they don't offer that, because I presume that that's the preferred format for artists.
I think it's coming.
Even photographers would prefer this format.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Only Gen Z would prefer portrait.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll be able to do that. I don't think the Art of Sierra is ever going to come out.
Why not?
They've been working on it for 20 years, I think. They're big Sierra collectors. I think Brandon Klassen. I can't remember the other guys' names.
Activision is known for hanging on to the Sierra IPs without doing anything with them. And so maybe now with Microsoft's acquisition of Activision, then they'll try to do what Disney has done with LucasArts. So for example, LucasArts has done the same thing. They held on to their IPs like Monkey Island and such. But after Disney acquired them, then LucasArts became more of a legal entity that provides other companies licensing IP for them to make games. So maybe this way they'll be able to provide with new artwork. I don't know if there's any archive at Sierra or at Activision that has something that hasn't been made public yet.
Like I said, these guys that were making the book were just individual collectors, and they contacted a lot of us. I know that Mark Hutchins and I, and I'm sure many other people were contacted. I don't know if Andy sent them anything, but I sent it all away to them. It was kind of scary to do that, but they scanned it all in, and they were ready to make this big coffee table book. It would have been nice. But that was a long time ago.
Maybe you can create that book.
No, thank you, sir. Maybe just with my stuff. Yeah, I might do a small book, but I would have loved to have seen it all in one volume. Andy Hoyos, and there were so many good artists there. Darlu Gams and Nathan Gams and John Schroeds. And I mean, these guys were great. They came out of Art Center School of Design in Pasadena, and they were art ninjas, man. I was like, whoa, how do I work with these guys? I learned a lot from those guys. They were very generous. Bill Davis was a great art director.
So currently,
Cheryl Sweeney.
Currently, you have concept art for which games?
Do I have?
Yeah, the concept art.
I sold it all. I sold almost all of it.
But you scanned it.
Oh, yeah. And they scanned it, too. They did a better job scanning it than I did, yeah. I scanned it.
You should have kept the scanner you had on the drawing board in your setup.
Yeah, it was a good scanner, actually. Yeah.
So what can you tell me about your book, Ignore the Singing Pig?
Oh, it's just a collection of the wide open cartoons. A bunch of silly one-panel cartoons. Well, a little esoteric here and there, but
and where can people buy it?
You can buy it on Amazon.com. Just look for Rich Powell or Ignore This Singing Pig. And if you want a signed copy of it, just contact me at my website and I'll mail you one. Yeah, it's $20.
Okay. And before we conclude our conversation, one final question from me. What are your plans for 2024 and how can people stay in touch with you and your work?
Well, I'm just going to continue doing my cartoon and whatever freelance work I get, and I'm going to create some more collections for books. And if anybody ever needs to get in touch with me, you just go to richpowell.com.
Well, thank you so much, Rich, for chatting with me today. It's been an absolute blast.
Thank you. Thank you, man. I appreciate that you like those games so much. It means a lot. We felt like we were just toiling away at this job, and it's always nice to run into somebody that remembers those things. I mean, it's a long time ago.
Yeah, for you guys, it was just another day at work, and for us, it was our entire childhood. So
yeah, that's great. That's great. I love that.
So thank you, Rich.
Thank you. See ya.